So, welcome to the Lava Users Forum. This is the second time we've run this. We're planning on running one of these as long as people find it useful, and as long as we find it useful in the Lava team to interact with users, find out what we're doing wrong, what we're doing right, and what you'd like us to do in the future. Yes, this is not me talking to you. This is, please, you lot talking to us. Come on. Yes. No, not Neil. We don't want to talk to him. Yes. Yes. Explicitly, we don't want this to be Neil telling people, no, you're wrong. We've had some of that in, yes. Although that's entertaining, it doesn't help us very much.
Experts are a bit stubborn.
Yes. So, explicitly, please talk to us and tell us your experiences and what we can do to help you better. This may be a shocking concept. It hasn't really happened much in the past. In the new Lava world, we actually want to try and develop and support what people need, rather than what we've guessed at what people need, which apparently hasn't worked too well in the past. So I have been going through, we have one slide of content, so I will make the most of it. And my role most recently has been substantially extending the documentation that we have. And working on improving both the level, the content, the layout, hopefully making it more useful. Again, please shout at me if you think that there's anything missing. We know that there's some stuff missing yet. If there's anything else we can do, if there's anything that's unclear, please tell us. Yes, Neil is currently editing a pad which is linked from the session in Pathable, which is where he's going to be taking notes, so we have a record of this afterwards. That's not so we can track down the people who are complaining and shoot them afterwards. It's because we want to actually track this and, you know, and try and make improvements.
Well, cancel the contract.
Shush, Dave. And the last, or the next piece is, what do people want out of Lava? Again, we try to do what people need, and hopefully what people want. They're not always the same. We are aware of this. But that's it for me for now. Who'd like to talk to us?
I'll start it off, since I'm not directly in the Lava team anymore. So, I think the device dictionary stuff is brilliant, and I think that's working really well. Where I think we could improve is a way to actually add devices and device types from the command line, because essentially we can't really automate. You know, I've been working with Docker deployments of Lava, and it's really awesome, and it's nice to be able to give somebody a Docker container with devices that are already configured and they can just start running jobs. And to do that though, since it's based on the host name, and Docker takes your base host name and sometimes will hash it. So as you're adding devices, you have to make sure you do that once the Docker container starts so that the devices have the right worker. So essentially what we have now is a bunch of curl scripts going and, you know, fetching the cookie and pecking at the web UI, but it would be really great to have a command line tool to simply add a device. So you do device type, device, and then the device dictionary, all from the Lava managed command line. I think that would be,
Yeah, I think, or do you have the device dictionary?
Microphone.
Sorry. Have the device dictionary in a file rather than having to type in the device dictionary from the command line.
so I don't mind that. It's more of, you have to go, so even if you add a device dictionary, it doesn't show up as a device type in the scheduler, right, or a device. You have to go in there and do that process, and then it shows up, right?
There were helpers for that written. They need to be updated. That's
Yeah, like
the basic
they add
thing.
device one for V1, right?
and then documented.
Yes. Because that would be great. Now, what do you think about exposing it as an XMLRPC call? Just because then you could register devices from remote, you wouldn't have to have access to the command line on the master.
Sure, that sounds really cool. I know Bruni, unfortunately isn't here, has been playing quite a bit with his own Lava installation in the last week. and has come up with a few more suggestions on how to make it easier to do your initial setup. There's a few things we can do there.
So with respect to the device dictionary, like I don't see a problem in adding a XMLRPC call, except that the device type should be of a known type. So the Jinja has to exist. So if it is an unknown type of device, then like there should be a way to like push that Jinja and then add it as part of Lava. So if that is what is there, like we can't do it. I think we can't be able to make it as part of XMLRPC, because like people can push a wrong Jinja which can crash things out. So
That's a good point, actually. So are you, what you're proposing then is if I create a new device type and I have a Jinja for it, you could push that in without having to rebuild the Lava server source? Is that what you're saying?
Well, you could do, sorry, you could do that already. You just put it in ETC, Lava server.
I was just going to say it's etc. The problem with that, of course, is that the XMLRPC user does not have permission to anything in etc.
Yeah, but I also see potential issues with having people just be able to randomly.
Everything of so the bits we talked about with XMLRPC in this bit are all going to be super user only, unless you've got super user on your tokens for that instance. You are not going to get to make any of those calls.
Okay, I mean, at the moment, I've just built I'm building a salt state to do ETC Lava server, blah, 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 whatever the path is, to get device types in there.
And instead of an XMLRPC call, what about a new manage command, lava-server manage, something, because if you already need to access ETC to put a file inside, you already have access to the master, so it's maybe more what you need.
Yeah, so I think it's more of, I'd like to be able to create slaves, right, that run in containers, that go talk to the master. It says, here's the devices, I'm registering these devices, kind of thing. So it's not that I couldn't access it, it's just that now I can't orchestrate that. I have to basically install everything on the master and then start the slave up, which isn't bad, but it would be nice if I could do remote calls from the slave to kind of register those devices.
But in this case, you're more creating a new device and a new device type.
Yeah,
it's really, for Lava, it's really different to create a new device type, because you will need a file in ETC. And if you just create a new device, it's different.
Exist, right? So they're supported upstream, and I want to add. So I've got QEMU devices on the master, and I want a Mustang locally, right? I want to be able to go say create Mustang device type, and then create Mustang 01, and here's the device dictionary for it. Makes sense. Yeah.
So Lava server manage commands for creating new files and etc. Or even just
New device types.
new device types are just
And device
shell access on the master.
Yeah.
Existing device types XMLRPC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, who's
Let's
next?
just ask how many people have been working with V2.
You beat me to it.
Well,
Yeah.
you want to tell your experience with V2?
Yeah, sure. So I've been working on trying to get the IFC board running on V2, and some people might have seen me pleading for help on IRC over the last little while. With a fair amount of hacking, I got it working, and I can actually submit a job now to an IFC board. It is something that, at least the code, I used the 2016-9, I think, version of the code, so it doesn't support it, that mode where you use fastboot to download the image and then you switch to a serial to actually talk to it instead of ADB. That's not in the 2016-9, so I had to do a fair number of hackery to get that going. And eventually got it. One of the things that, I got tripped up on was that a few parts of the dispatcher seemed to run on the server, and so sometimes when I was mucking with the dispatcher, I was getting issues on the server and I couldn't quite understand where the handoff was between those two, going back and forth. But I can get the code later and see with you guys. I'm sure a lot of it's not the appropriate way to do it. Is just to get it off the ground, because my next step actually was to try to get a embedded device going on this. So I wanted to learn the deploy and boot methods and all of that stuff. And I really liked his talk this morning, because it seems like some of that work's done for me now. Because yeah, that's really ultimately what I'm trying to get. is some of the devices that we have running on RTOS starting to be managed in a Lava setup so that I can download images and start doing some minimal testing on those devices as a next step.
Yeah, you said that you had issues to know where the code executed between Lava master and Lava slave.
Yeah,
You said when because you were developing you were changing the
I
Python
was
code.
changing the Python
Yeah,
code
okay.
over there,
I think this is linked.
We talked about today,
Yeah,
where the
so-
server's going to go down looking for methods that you described, and if
Yeah.
it doesn't understand that in the
Yeah,
dispatch.
I have a patch that fixed that.
Okay.
We were talking with Tyler about it. So it now in the next release it should be fixed for that. So it will be everything related to pipeline, to buildings pipeline, runnings pipeline will be only on the slave, nothing in the
that's
master,
exactly
absolutely
the problem.
nothing.
I was doing most of the changes on the slave, but then there were a couple of times that I actually had to move that code over to Lava Dispatcher on the master.
Yeah, because in fact we were describing the pipeline, so it's a big file that says that a full description of the pipeline to have a better description in the UI, and this file was generating on the master. Now it's generating completely on the slave, and it's sent back to the master. So you won't have any pipeline-related code running on the master. It will be only on the slave.
Okay.
So you won't have this issue anymore when my patch will be applied.
So I'm curious then, if you have different code running on the dispatcher, on the master, and then on the slave, you know what I'm talking about? I'm just curious what that does.
So we've already got support in the, this was back to 2016-6, I think we put this in. We put in a compatibility calculation. So when you build the pipeline, you know what compatibility you are expecting at both ends. If they disagree, you get a fail job.
Yeah, I'm just more wondering, so like adding devices, you've been through this, right? So you add devices, but you don't want to go update code on the master and the slave. You just kind of want to work on the slave for a while until you're ready. Is that supported? Like if you're making code changes there, then everything will be okay?
Now, yes, it will be with
It
my
will be?
patch. It won't
Okay.
be an issue anymore because as long as the slave and the master, I'm speaking about the processes, Lava dispatcher, slave, and Lava master. As long as they are the same version, so they speak the same protocol, you won't have any issues. Because technically, Lava slave does create a new process, and this process will execute a pipeline. And then just send messages, so it's not an issue after that.
Yeah, because that really helps speed up the development process, especially when you have to, go reinstall the dispatcher on the master and then the slave. Exactly.
And of course, this should actually make life a lot easier in the mode you were looking at, talking about this morning, where you don't have a master. You know, you're just running things direct in the, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, who here hasn't played with V2 yet? Congratulations, did you volunteer to talk to us? Is there any reason for that? Are you waiting on device support, or?
You can explain it all. I'm driving batty.
Okay, so,
Yeah, for the power management working group, they've got their own micro instance. This is just background explanation for everybody else. And we need the ARM Energy Probe support in V2 before they can switch to V2. That said, we still haven't got V1 working either, but that's but it's supposed to work. It's supposed to work in V1, but
lots of things are like that, yeah.
the code is about 4 years old, and that was about the last time it was ever tested. Using all the signal handlers. Yes, it's really messy. No. So, as I'm discovering.
Wasn't it, they didn't actually need the signal handling part of it because they've already got that half. They just wanted the device exposed.
I think they were using a signal handler. Yeah. So essentially, Lava Test Shell would start, right, and then they would use a signal to start recording sampling from the energy
But
probe.
they're doing all the starting and stopping themselves inside their own test shell because they
Yeah,
want that.
exactly.
They want the control of exactly when that recording starts. and ends.
Yeah, I mean, it's not
Rather
really
than
exact
actually
because
doing
it's
the round trip.
proxying a message over the serial console and then starting it. So, I mean,
Yeah.
when you send start doesn't really mean it's going to start sampling at that exact time.
But if you
right?
do that actually inside the test shell, it will, because that would mean
Right.
so if they have the path to the device in /dev, then they are poking the device directly.
So do we want to talk about controlling external power equipment like that? I mean, or just external equipment in general? Because I think that's a good use case.
Well, in terms of V2, that's...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
What's our thoughts there?
in V2, we pass it through to a container and run it so that the container is in control of the, whatever the device. I mean, it's a measuring device, whether it's power consumption or audio or video, whatever, it's a measurement type device. For V1, it is sort of a bit, well, it's clunky, to put it mildly, but then we were dealing with a very clunky system at the time. Yeah. And as Tyler said, you say start, but actually you can't guarantee. So in your test shell, you probably have to have a delay and make sure you've actually started before you then execute the code you want to start measurement on. Yeah.
How long a delay are we talking, or is it random?
Seconds.
Seconds?
Yes.
Ow.
It's the message being passed through a serial, and it's got to execute the command, and then it's going to send an ACK back to let the process continue.
Ow.
I mean, at the time, it seemed like a good way to go because we didn't really have those hard requirements, but now I think people want more precision.
Well, V2 gives us the opportunity, far more than V1 did, to do this properly. And so what I'm doing is I'm trying to get not just ARM Energy Probe, but any sort of device that we want to measure the generic support in there. So I'm not doing a specific solution just for
The particular
this.
problem with the ACK is not just the latency, that's bad enough. The problem with the ACK is that it gets interlaced with the real kernel messages. So you poke something, and the kernel's going to output something on the serial console. And before you know it, that has then contaminated the signal that's going back to the dispatcher.
We see that all the time with some boards worse than others. Actually, some kernels worse than others. But yeah, so you've got the danger that you don't actually spot the signal. And then...
Yeah, and then you're
Better
waiting
off.
forever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Joy.
The test itself runs on the board, but then you have support for a measuring device, as you call it. So it's like, it's a multi-node?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, so no, the original signal stuff wasn't multi.
No, I'm talking about V2.
Oh, V2, yeah. So it's a container. It's the V2
So it's like,
replacement for multinode.
so it's like Android job?
Yeah.
So if I execute the test on the device, so how does it get there?
So I think what Milos was getting at here is, what happens if the external device isn't connected to the
So
dispatcher?
basically
right?
what I'm getting at is like we have a board that Lisa wants to run her tests on. So we have a MediaTek board that does something, right? We have the energy probe that's connected to the board. So where are the tests that should be running on the board? So is it like they have their own test shell, and then we have the container controlling the energy probe, or how does it work?
I think he's, yeah. How do you start sampling on the energy?
No.
probe, right?
I mean, so you have a Linux running on the board that you want to measure.
Yeah.
So where do you control the measurement from?
That's what I'm saying, yeah. Is that how do you initiate the process? That's a good question. I'm not sure. How do you guys think about it? I mean, so how, from a test definition standpoint, are you going to initiate the sampling?
Because I have very sort of similar use case for recording the video output. So I run the test on the testing board that's basically playing back the video, the known video file, and then I have to record it on the other end. But I have to start and stop it and then compare, right?
Yeah.
So how is it working with Android and ADB? So if you want to put an APK on in V2,
Yeah, and Android is a different beast. So basically, you run everything on the host, and then you have like ADB shell to the device, execute something, and then at the same time you can control your other device from the same host. In here, we're running Linux on the board, so you have to have SSH shell, or I don't know.
it's a good question. I think that's something we need to investigate more in that use case.
that's why I'm asking whether it's multi-node or a single node.
So, we're going to have to actually look at how that actually works, but we still need to avoid the round trip along the serial console.
Well, and I'm also thinking
But
too.
multinode isn't actually going to help you, because for multinode to do it, you would then have to have a multinode of a dedicated LXC and a dedicated device. So that way it would work. If you do it using the LXC protocol, then currently that isn't going to actually tie both ends together. So we would need to work out how we actually get the message from, because the basic problem for anybody who doesn't understand the ARM energy probe is that you've got connections onto a board, but the other end of that cable goes into the dispatcher.
Well, so
or USB
let's
port.
complicate that use case a little bit more. Now, what Milos is saying is that he's got an HDMI capture card, which isn't going to fit in one of the DL360s because it's PCIe with a big slot. So that's going to be another host that he wants to talk to initiate the capture. And so we also need to think about that.
That might actually have to be genuine multinode to get that to work reliably.
I can imagine some like starting
Wait. If we don't use the mics, we don't get any of this captured.
So I can imagine that I start the LXC container on the host that's controlling either the energy probe or the HDMI capture card, and then have SSH connection to the board that's under test. I'm not sure if that fits well for power management.
It's a secondary connection, right?
Well, like I can do it from my own shell scripts, like start the SSH shell and then execute the commands there on the board, right?
Yeah. So it's almost like you need a device type for the HDMI capture card because essentially that's what you're running it on, right? Yeah, that's interesting. So from this container to start the capture, you have to be able to run Lava test shell, right?
You can probably do it in a container. You just have to have access to the actual V4L device.
Right, but what I'm saying is, okay, so you're going to write your test case for this, right? And you're going to describe what's going to happen inside the LXC container. That's Lava test shell, right?
The container is a test shell.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So you're fine.
That's how you write your definition.
And Remy's already got the secrets support so that we can push a key into the container that is allowed already on the test device. So now you've got that loop. So it's all then contained within one operation, and that also gives you the synchronization implicitly, because you're waiting for the SSH command to return before we do anything about it.
Right.
Yeah, but so like the only missing bit is like when to call the SSH. Like this is when to establish the SSH connection. So you have to know the IP address of the board under test, right? Or does this come from the dictionary?
It could come from the dictionary if the board has a fixed IP address. It can come from the device dictionary. We've still got. It's a similar problem to what we've got with LXC and Android. Is you've got to have the serial number to be able to find the damn thing, and it's exactly the same problems you're going to have with ADB over TCP/IP. Exactly the same problem again. So we are going to probably come to the lab at some point and say there's a need at some point for fixed IP addresses
Which
for
is
some of these devices.
all absolutely fine, except for some devices which have,
We are not going to do this with ARM deals, don't worry.
have weird MAC address issues.
This will only be supported for devices that come up with predictable, reliable, and admin configurable MAC addresses.
Okay.
Anything else? No.
So it sounds like we're beginning to work that out. Anybody else who is waiting on support in V2?
I have an interesting...
Switch his microphone off.
Yeah, the thing is, on Android we have a use case where a build slave in Jenkins has to talk to a device. I wanted to understand if Lava can provide support for an external connection with the device in the lab. It's similar to a hacking session, but I would prefer it to be as simple as possible so that the Jenkins slave can request for a Nexus device from the lab, and the multinode, the container can provide us with the SSH IP address and port where we can establish the connection. And from the host, from the Jenkins slave, we'll then run ADB connection to the device. And the need for this is because there are tests which are run from the build itself. It cannot be moved into Lava. So the build itself will expect the device to be connected to the machine itself. So we have this kind of setup done manually with the lab, but I prefer it to be supported by the Lava dispatcher as well as lab setup, which will reduce the cost for us.
We have a setup similar to that, not all the way to that, for the toolchain working group, because they've got a Jenkins slave with a VPN certificate access through to the TCWG lab, and so they have the link and they can talk directly to devices. They are not Lava devices in this particular instance.
Yes. So the critical problem here is going to be scheduling, because you need to actually understand what the impact is on other test jobs that need to use those devices. And when you have a shortage of hardware, this is going to become a critical blocker.
So I'm just curious, because I think I understand what you're trying to do. So if the Jenkins job creates a Lava job with a parameter, it's the callback address to Jenkins, and submits the job, and so LXC comes up, right, or you just want ADB access.
It could wait for quite some time.
So, but the LXC container is going to run with Lava test shell, right? So you could have Lava test shell take that IP address in, you could set up the board however you need it to, and then you, since you're running whatever script you have in Lava test shell, could send that information back to the Jenkins job saying, here's the port that you connect on. Although within a container context, unless you're running it with privileges, you're not going to be able to get an IP address out.
Yeah, it's not an issue with shortage of devices. These are kind of reserved devices for the builds itself, which will, it's like more of a reserved device for. Yeah, even if they are under Lava, the expectation is the owners of the stakeholders of these jobs will make sure these devices are provided to Lava, and they are specifically used for these jobs only. I understand. These are specific Nexus devices, and these are more of like reserved devices to be running only these jobs. I'm not bothered about the shortage of resources. The issue that I see is the access setup that has to be done through the Lava, through the lab for external devices to access it.
So were you looking to flash the device with a build, or you just want it's already flashed and running and you just want to provide an ADB connection?
Yeah, that's another discussion. We would prefer to have a standard health check job to be flashed, or a better thing is that you don't flash the device at all. Do a dummy boot call, and just device would still be in boot state, and you are able to establish the connection. Reason being, sometimes we have stability issues with these production devices where flashing and booting would have stability issues, the way we've seen with Nexus 9 kind of things. The idea is that for these devices, we don't want to actually flash or boot anything. We're just interested to run some tests. That's it.
So I am curious, what does Lava do for you here? What do you gain from using Lava?
Device management is the only thing which we are expecting from Lava.
Jenkins can't actually do the connections to the device as easy as Lava does. But I'm thinking about...
Well, I think the problem with Jenkins is how are you managing the devices with the Jenkins jobs running? Because you have a few devices connected, right?
Are you doing it manually? Is it? No, I was thinking was... how are you handling issues that we have with these kinds of setups of persistence when if you're not flashing it, then if you make any changes to the device by running these tests, those changes will be persistent and it may contaminate the next test.
The thing is, the way we run these tests, it's more like a C-root kind of environment where it doesn't actually affect the underlying
so it
system
cleans
image.
up after itself?
Yes, yes.
Right.
To answer your question, we are currently having around 5 devices, and these are statically configured we have the static map between Jenkins and this device. The thing is, we can't scale up with the current setup. With Lava, that'll help us. I mean, if we add in a couple of build machines in Hetzner's, and then just adding those devices in the lab will help us. But the way we want, I mean, if we do, it will not scale up well.
So that almost sounds like a good fit potentially for the masterless setup that Tyler's been talking about. You know, just having a dispatcher.
Well, see, the problem that I'm seeing, so your build machines are in the lab, right? No. They're external, so we need to firewall rules to get the traffic through, and then you also need to expose the TCP/IP port, which are forwarding the ADB connection through on the local dispatcher itself, which I think is also problematic. So there's 2 levels of redirection that need to happen to get that out.
That's very similar to what we're doing for TCWG right now.
Well, you guys can't configure the firewall right there. You'd have to just set a port ranges out. Yeah. I think this is where it's hard to make Lava, because it's like the paradigm that Lava is like a test automation framework and not a device management framework, although it does manage devices. So it's like, it's this thin line that we still haven't really solved on how to provide both, right?
We did it with OpenStack to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of helps the developers as well. I mean, where we just want to run some tests on the device and we don't have it at our desk. The hacking session does work, but if we can simplify it, that's what we expect.
But this is where, again, I come back to the issue of persistence. You've got to make sure that these kinds of tests always use that root protection and always clean up after themselves, because these are the problems where we have this all over the time, all the time, is that people come up and say, I just want to boot the device and run my test. And they forget that the next person is going to be affected by what you leave behind.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with your point there. The thing is that with Android, it's not like we're going to brick the bootloader or anything in a way through which you cannot recover the board.
No, I'm not talking about necessarily changing the lower levels of the support.
Yeah.
You can even make changes in the operating system. One thing that will scare Dave Whitless down there is if one of these tests manages to turn off ADB protection, ADB support, which is possible through UI automation, and you can just end up changing the settings through a normal run of the test. The test doesn't complete, it doesn't undo those changes, and now you have got a device that's not bricked, but is completely invisible to Lava.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. That's a valid point.
So I'm just going to say we could write something to do this that's outside of Lava. You need a queue, right? So something that manages the devices, knows about it, you could make a simple request to it. And then the other thing it's going to have to be able to do is kill the tunnel when you're done, or it times out.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that's probably if you want to get some scalability, writing something like that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, agreed. It really doesn't sound like a good fit as part of Lava.
Yeah, just using Lava for the scheduling part.
Yeah, because if anything, you're going to be fighting the scheduling all the time. I mean, in terms of opening ports and whatever, you could even have something VPNing outbound to somewhere else and then leaving a tunnel open.
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, the way I would do it is I've got that shell script that will take local ADB connections and then forward them on a local port, and essentially use like ZMQ to manage the queue of requests to come in, and then just dump a port range onto that, you know, and then it manages the devices that it's forwarding and the port range, right? So that, you know, it basically would send a request back to the person that asked saying, here's your IP and port that you need to hit, and then manage that connection, basically be a broker, right?
So there's that idea we've had for a while about, for a port forwarding daemon, which just sits,
You know,
it's probably overkill.
it is, I think just dumping a port range is just simpler than trying to modify, because then you have something automated messing with your firewall.
Yeah,
or, you know.
Yeah, scary stuff. Anybody else waiting on V2 support for their devices? Yeah.
One question here. Hands up anybody who cares about Highbank Midway in V2. Tal, if you put your hand up, you're right in the device integration.
Well, it's working with kernel CI and V1, so as long as it doesn't go away.
But that's what we're thinking. There are devices where we have to balance the workload that's going to be there of doing the device integration.
So did you see the latest Highbank code that I wrote? It's just, I turned it into a bootloader device. It doesn't need all the crazy IPMI stuff anymore. I abstracted the IPMI power commands into a power off and a hard reset command, and then configured it with U-boot. Midway needs to be done, but we can, if it's a standard U-boot config now, so it should be fairly portable to V2.
That sounds much better.
Yeah.
These are the questions we need to ask people. There are some devices currently supported in Dave's lab.
Is it just because they're loud, though? Is that why you guys want them gone?
No, it's not. It's not the volume. It is the fact that we're not sure how much work it's going to be, and is it worth it because these devices are supported. And
let me just point out that the Midway, we have one node in Lava. It's very flaky.
yeah,
We have no way of getting support for it, clearly. In fact, just before this session started, Maria and I were looking at the Midway because it had failed, because halfway through the Sol session just terminated, and that happens all the time.
yeah. So these are the kinds of things. Where
So my concern is long-term support for a device we can get no support on.
Exactly. In that case, I think we just do away with Midway. And then, as long as there's enough Highbank nodes that are functioning, we can use them until they die off, because we'll never get them again, then we can just...
Sure, that's exactly where we're coming from. There are there's not many, there's a few devices, that we went through this last week. There's a few devices that have V1 support only, but as far as we can see, they're basically dead. They may not have stopped moving yet, but they're basically dead. You know, so probably isn't much point in spending any effort moving to V2 on some of them. If there is a point, then obviously we want to know. We can do it. But you know, we went through, and there aren't many devices left that we don't have V2 support for. We know about, you know, Dean is still finishing off Juno support, that kind of thing. But we really want to get to the point where we could migrate our own lab off V1 some point this decade. You know, so it's a priority we'd like to focus on, is actually supplying all the V2 support for all of the devices that we actually care about. If we can get to that point in our own lab, we can then start to sensibly say to people, V1 support, you know, we've been threatening that we're going to start taking it out.
I almost guarantee that we are the only Lava instance anywhere in the world that's got Midway or Highbank in. I mean,
yeah, so the detail of this will actually be in my migration talk later on in the week. So if you're interested in the timescale of what we're planning for the end of life of V1 and how we're going to do it and what the requirements are and all that kind of stuff, I'm going through that in the migration talk Thursday. I think it's Thursday. Yeah, you can check in Pathable if it responds to you. Friday, same day. And Central's got a talk on the LXC support on Friday as well. So if containers and how you use containers for your test jobs is relevant to what any of the questions you've been asking, then Central's talk is one to go for as well.
I think we've got about 5 minutes left. Wow, that's gone fast. Yeah. Anything else people would like to talk about? Are people liking V2?
yeah.
Is it making your life better?
bit by bit.
Good.
YAML's so much better.
Yeah, hell yes. Yeah, comments in your jobs. So Dave, as the main admin of the biggest lab we know about, or that we have any interaction with, what do you not like about V2? What are we still missing?
Oh, I do.
There's no resubmit button for V2 yet.
Yet.
Yeah, no, I mean, it seems ridiculous. Oh, sorry. It seems ridiculous that, that would be a feature, but it's actually quite handy when you run a job that fails and you're like, okay, I just want to click resubmit here. I don't want to go and back to the command line and do it.
So we don't have web submission yet in V2. That's something that a number of people have pointed out already.
We are supposed to be getting, so there are meant to be member assignees who are doing this, and we're waiting to see any more from them. Otherwise, probably we'll just end up doing it.
Anything else, Dave? No?
I think I have a concern, but it's not so much about V2, it's about legacy when we switch V1 off. And at what point that code gets removed and we no longer have any V1 support at all, anywhere. And I'm sure,
Is that a specific concern, or is it just worrying because it's going away?
oh, no, I'm happy for V1 to go away. I'm worried about other people outside of Linaro who have Lava instances, and evangelizing enough and getting the message out there enough that this is happening and it will go away and your V1 jobs will stop working.
So, again, I'll cover this in the migration talk itself and the detail of how we're going to do it. But for everybody in this room here, if you have any stake in Lava, you need to be subscribed to the Lava announced mailing list. That's where all this kind of stuff, that's where all the timing will be announced. We can do what we can to put big prominent notices in the documentation, in the news file that you get when you install the package. But at the end of the day, if the best medium for getting this information out there is forums like this to get people subscribed, and then just use the mailing list. It's really, really low volume. You get 1 or 2 emails a month, at most.
So,
one of those is notification that we've just done a production release and there's a new version available that has all these changes. And we limit it to the most important messages only. Any other discussions can happen on the Lava users list and the other list that we've got. So it's really important that everybody who has any stake in it is subscribed to Lava Announce. And the link is there in the documentation.
So what do you think about whenever we figure out what the month is, we're going to switch it off and delete the code? A couple months before that, we put warnings on the XMLRPC job submission in exactly to say,
yep,
you were submitting a legacy job, it is going away, here's the documentation for V2, you should migrate.
Yep. Because the first thing that happens, the first thing that actually cuts anybody off is we're going to just drop JSON or V1 submissions at the XMLRPC and the web UI level. That's the first thing. But we will try and do as much warning of that as we can.
And ahead of that, there should be a warning coming back. This is now deprecated,
yeah,
and it will go away.
So we will have the warning in for a full release. Right. Then we do the release that takes out the submission. Then we start doing. So this is all in the talk on Friday. Okay. We have gone through some of the levels of this.
Okay.
It's just there'll be plenty of more time to work out exactly where we put the warnings and when the timing is. But at each stage of this, we're looking at a full release cycle between each of the actual big stages.
Okay.
And then once V1 is gone, we do have a slew of really cool, cute things that we can't even consider doing while we have any V1 code left. So it's a, yes, really, Dave. we do have some very cool things that we'd love to do, but are just totally impossible to do without removing the V1 because they're just not going to work with that available.
Right. So V1 is currently and actively holding us back from things that we know V2 can do. And there is, so we're already noticing that we're having a team held back from things they want to do by having V1 even just present in the code base. So that's why we're pushing this and pushing and pushing. It's not something that we can just live with. We can't just leave the code there. It'll be in Git. You've got all the Git history. You've got old releases. In terms of what's actually released, it must go away.
When was the last time we changed any of the V1 code?
There's occasional changes go in, not to actually make any behavior changes, just to keep it running.
We actually get more contributions from people outside Linaro for V1 code than anything else.
I think that's what Dave's concern is that, you know, people are still sending patches for that where they really, you know, that's true. Actually, a lot of the kernel CI guys are sending the device configs. Is it mostly configs or is it actually code changes for V1?
When I say there have been changes, I'm talking about 2 or 3. Okay. So, you know, but there have been, but equally we've had 3 or 4 changes from people outside of Linaro for V2 as well.
That's a good sign.
So, but we've just had 2 or 3 changes for V1 related code. I got the impression, reviewing those, that those were put there because the V2 support wasn't there yet.
That's perfect. That's exactly what we're doing.
So I think we should call a halt there. Thank you everyone for joining in. I hope we're not scaring people off too much for those folks who haven't shouted at us. Definitely please make sure you're signed up for the Lava Announced list, as Neil was saying, and we will be carrying on some of this discussion later in the week in the migration talk. Thank you very much.